Welcome to EP3. Simple to complex, we make energy modeling easy. In this tutorial, we'll be taking you through using the new and improved EP3 wizard, as well as discussing EP3's overall philosophy on what a wizard should and should not do. Let's get started modeling. Before we start in our actual EP3 model, I want to take a minute to show you the drawings that we'll be using for this project. So this tutorial and subsequent tutorials will take you start to finish doing a detailed model in EP3. In this model, we're doing a schematic design level model using the wizard, and so we won't create all of the architectural detail that you see in this model, but this is a 9-story residential building. It's about 72 feet wide by 50 feet deep, and floor to ceiling height is about 9'6". So those are the parameters we'll use in the building geometry wizard in EP3. So I'm going to open a second instance of SketchUp, and you can do this by holding down Shift while clicking on the SketchUp icon at the bottom of your screen. You can't see the bottom of my screen, but that's what I've done. I'm just going to give SketchUp a moment to start up. Here we go. So when I open SketchUp, I'm going to use a template that uses the unit type that I want to use in EP3. Once you get going with EP3, you can switch units, but the units that you have when you start EP3 are the units that the wizard will use. So for this model, it's in feet and inches, and I'll select an architectural template that uses feet and inches. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this person here because we don't need her in this model. And up on the upper right, this is my EP3 toolbar. If you don't see the toolbar and you have installed EP3, go to View, Toolbars, and click the check mark next to EP3. We have a page on our website, ep3.solutions, that is dedicated to installation. So take a look there if you're not seeing the EP3 extension toolbar. So at the moment, this is just a blank SketchUp model. You can model in SketchUp like normal. Once you click on any of the EP3 buttons, the EP3 wizard will start. And from that point forward, you have the ability to add energy and information using EP3. So I'm going to click on one of these buttons and get the wizard started. Our philosophy for the wizard in EP3 is that it should be something that can be used quite quickly in order to get all of the basic building elements that you need into your model. We also wanted to have the wizard produce a simulatable model, so you can do a schematic design EnergyPlus model in just a couple of minutes using the EP3 wizard. The wizard happens in a couple of steps. And step one, we're just looking at the items that we want to have in the model. What type of internal loads, what type of constructions, and each of these tabs, it doesn't matter which order you do them, you can click back and forth. So if we start with model settings, we can select the EnergyPlus version. EP3 can update to the newer version, but we can't do a transition to an older version. Right now we're supporting EnergyPlus 24.1 and 24.2, and we'll support newer versions of EnergyPlus as they come out. We always recommend that you use the newest version of EnergyPlus because there are bug fixes that happen with each iteration. We will also continue supporting the older versions of EnergyPlus starting with 24.1. Okay, so then we're going to select a weather file. And I'm going to select Burlington, Vermont, because that's my home city. Once we've selected it, you'll see that the weather file name shows up here. We can also select a climate zone. This will be used by the ASHRAE 90.1 Appendix G baseline generator, which at the time we're recording this tutorial, that baseline generator is still under development, but it will be released soon. We can set our run period. Default is for the simulation to run for 1 year, and I like that default, so I'll leave it alone. Okay, next let's go to internal loads. We have an EP3 library and a user library. So the EP3 library we ship with some internal loads for a couple of different general occupancy types. Now these loads come from a combination of sources, ASHRAE, and also some of the projects that we've created over the years. So take a look at the schedules and the internal loads for each project, inspect them, make sure that they align with what you are trying to model. Under residential, we have two different space types. We have residential apartments and residential circulation. I'm going to take both. You'll notice we also have a user library, and this will be created, you will create the user library using a tool that exists in EP3. So once you've created some custom schedules, some custom internal loads, EP3 will help take you through the process to create your own user library. Same thing with constructions, we have an EP3 library, and there are also tools within EP3 so that you can create your own user library that you can use over and over again. So EP3 ships with the ASHRAE 90.1 2022 minimum requirements and also the ASHRAE 90.1 Appendix G baseline constructions. So for Climate Zone 5, I'm going to take a look at the residential constructions. And if I click here, I can just get all of those residential constructions, all the different construction types. For service hot water, I can import a mixed water heater. And HVAC systems, I will select some system types. And for any of these, you can select as many or as few as you want. To have a complete simulatable model, you need something from every category, but you don't have to import something from every category if you don't want to. So under HVAC systems, I'd like to take the direct outdoor air system with water coils, and I'll take a fan coil. Under building geometry properties, we have two general options. One is to let EP3 draw a rectangular building, and this is appropriate for like a schematic design model. The other option is to draw your own building geometry, and that's appropriate for projects that you're starting in a little bit later phase. EP3 allows you to make large changes to your model quite quickly, and the building geometry user interface is so fast and so easy to use that we're not trying to recreate any of that in the wizard. The wizard is just to get you started with all of the different pieces that you need. So for this project, we'll let EP3 draw a rectangular building. We'll set the building width to our width of 70 feet. I'm sorry, 72 feet. The depth was 50, 9 floors, and a 9.5-foot floor to ceiling height. We don't have a plenum, so we will leave that to 0. And you'll notice as I mouse over that this little box is popping up with some additional information. So anytime you have questions about what any of the inputs mean, anywhere in EP3, not just the wizard, mouse over and take a look. The elevation of the lowest floor is the site elevation. The actual geographical elevation is determined by the weather file and site parameters in your model. I'll leave the building north access as 0 and 9.5 again as the roof height over the top floor. Now, this building has a flat roof with no overhang, so I can just leave the overhang and pitch at 0, but EP3 will draw you a more complex roof shape if you would like it to. I'll leave the window to wall ratio at 30%, and I'll do a 16-foot perimeter space step. Now, the last two inputs ask me what space type I want for perimeter spaces and what space type I want for core spaces. So I'll select residential apartments for perimeter and residential circulation for core. These space types, again, are quite easy to change later on, so we're not going to go through a complex calculation on how we want to assign things because we can change things as needed later. So I'll hit next, and the next step is where I can modify some of these inputs. So I can change the lighting power density, I can change some of the HVAC parameters. So here, again, we have a couple of categories. We have internal loads, HVAC inputs, service water heating, and schedules. Internal loads are categorized by different space types, and then all will apply to all zones. So our infiltration applies to all of the zones in the building. And then we have residential apartments, which has some occupancy, people object. Electric equipment, we have both hardwired and plug-in lights, and a sizing object. And there's similar objects for residential circulation. So I'm going to leave these defaults alone. With HVAC, we can change some inputs, for example, for the boiler, fuel type, and efficiency. Same with the chiller, we can change a COP. We won't go through all of these inputs. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to accept the defaults, and I will show you how to change these inputs also in detailed edit mode when we get there. With service water heating, the most important thing is to enter a peak use flow rate, so I'll select it 20 gallons a minute, and a use flow fraction schedule name. So there's a residential service hot water schedule that's been imported. Under schedules, this is a list of all of the different schedules in the model. And if you click on one, you can see a graph that shows the different day types and then the values for each of those day types. And clicking on the color here will allow you to click and drag to change the values. If you click on the text, you can add or remove day types to each series. And once you've changed some values, you can hit Save Data to make sure that data gets saved. So once you're all set with all of these tabs, hit Next. In this step, we're going to select the default constructions used for the project. So EP3 will do its best to find the appropriate construction types, and you can see that it's picked up the exterior wall construction for Climate Zone 5, and same with roof, entrance door, let's see, glazing, the fenestration, we actually want to choose, let's choose the operable fenestration. And underground floor, we'll do a section on F-factor materials a little bit later. This may look a little confusing. So I'm going to hit Finish Wizard, and it will take just a minute to do its thing, but it's generating the model right now. And the last piece that pops up is something that asks us to select zone conditioning equipment for conditioned zones. So on the left, you see these are names of zones. And then here we have a list, a clickable and actually movable list of zone conditioning equipment. So I have this DOAS air terminal and a fan coil. So if I click them, Gold shows that it's on, and I can actually change the simulation order. Generally, you want the least controllable piece of equipment first in the list, followed by more controllable equipment. So this direct outdoor air system is going to be less controllable than the fan coil, so that's going to be first in my list here. So I'm just going to click those on for each zone. It doesn't matter which order you click them, it just matters which order they appear in the list. Before we run any simulations, let's take a quick tour of EP3. Right now, and when you exit the wizard, you will be in the building geometry viewer. So on the right, we have a building geometry outliner, and you can see as I mouse over zone names or objects, that those objects will be highlighted in the 3D view. The outliner is organized by floor and also by roofs. So because we have an intermediate floor, this floor has its own sort of roof object as well. The intermediate floors and ceilings coming out of the wizard will have an adiabatic construction type. You could turn off and on visibility of any individual object using the outliner. And we can edit the geometry of an object by clicking on the right here. And then we enter into that particular SketchUp group and SketchUp instance. If you want to turn off the other geometry so it's easier to see what we're working with, you can use this button up here on the right. To get to the building geometry viewer, click on the button at the top that says, it looks like a little house, half yellow and half red. We also have the HVAC view, which is the button all the way over on the right. And this will get you the HVAC diagram. We also have an HVAC outliner where it's organized by loop. And again, mousing over an object will show you that object's location. So if we look at the hot water loop and we zoom in, we can look at the supply side and look at individual branches on the supply side. If you're familiar or want to learn about EnergyPlus branch and node connections, using the EP3 HVAC viewer to look at imported EnergyPlus files can really help you learn about that structure. Zooming in further will give you a little bit more information about the individual objects. You'll see the object name, and if you zoom in far enough, you'll see the type of objects. We have a boiler hot water here. To edit the inputs for each object, if you select the object and go up and grab the selected information dialog, this will allow you to edit the information for that particular object. So here we have the different EnergyPlus fields. So this is somewhat similar to the IDF editor, except EP3 has a lot more built-in intelligence. For example, if we look at the nodes for the boiler, and as I mouse over each node, it's highlighting the node location in the diagram. You'll also notice that these node names are not editable because EP3 is figuring all of that out for you. If I click on the loop itself, we'll see we have information for the loop, and we also, scrolling down, have the other objects associated with that loop. So sizing parameters for the loop, equipment list, and operation schemes are all included within the loop. In the HVAC outliner below our loops, we have a section for zone HVAC and water heaters. So under zone HVAC, we'll see our DOAS air terminal and our fan coil. Now these two objects also show up on the demand side of the connected loops. So this DOAS air coil, or I'm sorry, the DOAS air terminal will also show up on the demand side of the DOAS air loop. And the fan coil will show up on the demand side of both the hot water loop and the chilled water loop. If we click on the fan coil and look at our selected object information, up top we have all of the information for the 4-pipe fan coil itself. And again, we can mouse over nodes to see where they are. Scrolling down, we have inputs for replicated objects. So this means that because the fan coil was applied to all of the zones, we can take another look at this zone conditioning equipment list here. I'm going to expand this so everything looks the same. Each one of these zones has a fan coil attached to it. And instead of creating 20 some odd fan coils in the space, in the object space in SketchUp, which would be quite messy, we've just created one and we're replicating it for each individual zone. You'll notice up here all of the inputs have a white background, and down here we have a red background. Anytime you see a red background in EP3, it means that that value is an inherited value. We can change any of these inputs associated with an individual zone. So if I would like the low speed supply airflow ratio for my bottom floor 01 zone, if I want to change it, I can make it 0.5. Now, when I refresh the view, I can hit refresh here. We'll see that the background here is now white because that value was entered in this particular location in the model. It was entered in this EEM, in this efficiency measure, for this particular zone. Now, if I continue to scroll down, we'll see that this fan coil has an outdoor air mixer. It has a fan. It has a cooling coil. And it has a heating coil. And we also see the replicated objects for each one of those kind of child objects. So if changes need to be made to, say, the capacity or the operating schedules of any one of those objects, that can happen here. Same with the DOAS terminal. In this case, the DOAS terminal is just one object. There's no heating or cooling coils attached to it. However, we may want to change an availability schedule or the airflow method for this terminal for individual zones, and that can happen below here. To get back to building geometry view, we'll click the red and the yellow building up top. And we can look at information for any of these spaces or particular surfaces using the same dialog. So to look at information for a space, I can click on the space in the outliner. If I want to get information for a particular surface, say for a roof surface, I can go into that instance and click on a surface. Now, the outside boundary condition is determined automatically, but it can be changed here if you would like. Look at information about schedules, internal loads, etc. It's this button up here, the yellow eye with the circle. And we have a long list of different object types on the left. And we can toggle to look only at objects in the model. And we can further filter. So if I want to look at schedules, I can type schedule here and further filter to only look at schedules. So I could look at the same schedules we looked at in the wizard, and you'll see that we can edit them in the normal EnergyPlus text format, or I can click on the Edit Graphically button. I can click on the Edit Graphically button and take a look at those schedules graphically the same way that we did in the wizard. And same thing, click on the legend to click and drag and move these. And then you need to click Save Data in order to save the data. If you don't click Save Data, you'll get a pop-up asking if you want to. I'm going to hit No for now. To clear the filter, just delete it. I can look at lighting objects. These are the same ones we saw in the wizard. People, and there's some HVAC objects as well, such as set point managers. Now, there's something a little bit unique to EP3 with regards to zoneless and spaceless. If you're new to EnergyPlus, zoneless and spaceless allow you to apply lights or other objects to multiple zones at the same time. So if we take a look at this lighting object, you'll see here we have a zone or zoneless or spaceless name. And what's selected is the residential circulation zone list. Now, you'll notice that when I highlighted this text here just a couple of seconds ago, it actually took me to the zone list. So you can navigate around your model by clicking you can click on these fields. So if I click here, it will take me directly to that zone list. And actually, if I scroll down on this zone list, you'll see the electric equipment, lights, all these different items. And if I click on any one of these, it will take me to that object. So this helps you get around and edit those particular objects. Same with the schedule. If I click here, it will take me to that schedule. Let's go back to the zone list. We have 3, and you'll notice next to the name it says dynamically updated. Now, what does that mean? So here, there's a checkbox that says dynamically update the list, and that is checked. All of the checkboxes next to the names of other zones are checked, but they're also grayed out. So that means that this zone list called all, and all is a special string in EP3. If I have a zone list named all that's dynamically updated, it means that every single zone in your model will be on this zone list. With the residential apartments zone list, you'll notice that only zones named residential apartments are on this particular list. And residential circulation, only zones named residential circulation are on this list. So if we go to our model, let's go to the bottom floor, and perhaps this particular zone. So actually with the color that we have on these intermediate ceilings, it's quite hard to see the zone highlighting. So let's take a look at the materials dialog. So that's up here on the right. It's this kind of construction-y looking button. And I can pull up my adiabatic floor ceiling. And this is adiabatic because we've selected the construction adjacency to be adiabatic. But I can change the color of it right within the EP3 dialog, so by clicking on this color swatch. And I could change it to something, a much lighter color. The highlighter will show up better. So now we can really see the locations of all of our different objects. As I mouse over these spaces, they show up. If I mouse over interior walls and exterior walls, everything kind of shows up as I mouse over it. If I want to look at the inputs for an individual space, I use the same selected object dialog, and you click on that space in the outliner. We can see there's a zone name because these are spaces, not zones. Each space by default in EP3 has a zone created for it. And in subsequent tutorials, we'll get into how to model zones with multiple spaces. But for now, one space, one zone. There are a couple of other inputs here. For the most part, you can ignore these and leave these as defaults. You can set some space type tags, and you can read these little notes here about what they're all about. If I'd like to get information about a particular surface, let's look at, say, a roof surface. I click all the way in and click on this surface. I'll have information about this roof surface. Let's look at an exterior wall surface. So again, we can look at the surface and we can look at the window for the surface. An interior wall, if I click on it, we'll see the outside boundary condition here is surface, and there's an outside boundary condition object. And if you're really paying attention, you'll notice that there's an extra button right here which says View Adjacent Surface. And if I click on that, that will show me this top floor O2 residential apartment surface. Should look very similar, but it's just in EnergyPlus, there are multiple ways to model interior surface adjacencies. EP3 by default will sort of model half of the wall in one space and half of the wall in the adjacent space, and they have each other as outside boundary condition objects. Another button up here is this View IDF button, and this will show you the native EnergyPlus IDF for any individual object. And this is true all the way across and through EP3. So if we open this dialog here and we look at a lighting object and look at View IDF, we can see the IDF for that lighting object. Okay. So that's about it for the basic structure of EP3 tour. Let's run some simulations. So in order to run simulations, we click on this button here, which is Simulate/Export. The first step in simulating an EP3 model is translating it to EnergyPlus. We can also have EP3 simply just export and not do the simulation. But doing the simulation in EP3 gives you access to some graphical visualization tools that are not available in EnergyPlus. So In this model, we only have one efficiency measure, which is the base EEM. So let's just simulate that base EEM to start. So I'm going to check the box next to base EEM and hit simulate. It's going to ask me to choose a location to store this EnergyPlus file. So do a and we'll call this file wizard. You don't need to give it an extension. You can just name the file. So we're just waiting for EP3 to do the translation to EnergyPlus. And then the EnergyPlus simulation will pop up. While EnergyPlus is simulating, you're actually free to navigate, edit, and view your EP3 model. Simulation is complete. The results dialog will open automatically. If you want to see results again in the future, just go to the Global Settings dialog and click on View Results. All of the standard EnergyPlus tables are available for you to see. We at EP3 have pre-selected some of the most commonly used and useful tables for you. So input verification and results, annual building utility performance. There's also a lead summary, or all the different lead summary tables. And each one of these, we can look at the actual data. We can export that data to a CSV so you can import it into spreadsheets or run other calculations. And we can also take a look at a bar graph. If there are multiple efficiency measures, each efficiency measure will show up as its own color. And we'll get into that in a future tutorial. You can also select other reports that you would like to display.